about helping you take the next step in your faith journey so that you can live out the purpose God created you for. We believe that God has filled every life with amazing potential, and we want to help you discover that potential. If you are new to Genesis or how you can become more involved, then Starting Point is that place. In Starting Point, you can hear our heart and vision and ask questions in the life of Genesis. Starting Point meets every Sunday at 12:45, immediately following our second experience with a light lunch and childcare provided. To register, go to MyGenesis.TV, click Next Steps, then click on Starting Point. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us at Genesis today. We hope you have a blessed week.
Ready? Once upon a time, in a far, far away land, there lived a princess in a tall, tall castle.
You remember last year at state, 300 hurdles just
comes that hurdle off the track. fish in this lake? It's like the dead. I swear, I don't think there's a fish in this lake. I haven't caught anything all day.
Hey babe, how did it go? Did you catch anything?
Oh, a few.
Any keepers?
One of them was pretty big, actually. Yeah, it could have been the state record. I mean, I didn't have my scale, but it was big.
Let me see.
Well, I threw it back. You know my theory, let them go, let them grow.
We all love a good story, and starting in a couple weeks, we're going to kick off a series called Stories as we begin to make our way through the parables of Jesus. So it's going to be an exciting time. Beginning today, we start winding down our Christian series. Some of you are probably incredibly glad. Some of you probably wish we could go a little while longer, but we're in this series called Christian, and we're talking about this word because this word gets used a lot. A lot of people identify themselves as a Christian, but we don't really know what this word means, and we don't know what this word means because the Bible doesn't really define what it means to be a Christian. As a matter of fact, only 3 times in Scripture is this word used, and it's always used in a derogatory way by people outside the Jesus community to describe people inside the Jesus community. We've learned in our journey that the early followers of Jesus did not refer to themselves as Christians. We've learned that Jesus did not call his followers Christians. The early followers of Jesus called themselves by a far different name. Jesus referred to his followers by a far different term, one unlike Christian that is very easy to define, and that's part of what makes this word so terrifying. And Jesus called his followers what? Disciples. And in one instance, Jesus like, hey guys, he says, a new command I give you, love one another. And in case we weren't sure what that means, Jesus clarified it. He said, in the same way that I've loved you, you must love one another. And then he says this, by this, everyone will recognize that you belong to me, not by your morality, not by your doctrine, not by your church attendance, but by your love one for another. The distinguishing characteristic that will identify you to the world is how you love one another. And then last week, we drilled in deep on what this love looked like. The Apostle John, who had walked with Jesus, lived with Jesus, was getting on up in years, and he was like, I've got to write this stuff down. And as he began to reflect about Jesus, he was thinking, how can I best describe Jesus? How can I best characterize his love? And he said this, he says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. This speaks to the relational nature of God, that God wanted to be known, that God wanted to be experienced, that God wasn't just this concept or this supernatural being out in the sky that he wanted us to believe in, but he wanted us to know him, so he moved in among us. He says, we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And we know what grace is. We know what truth is. Grace says it's going to be okay. Truth says, no, we need to do something about this. Grace says you're forgiven. Truth says you're accountable. Grace says, that's okay, you messed up. It's going to be okay. Truth says, no, you messed up. We got to do something about this. And we have a tendency as individuals and as churches to lean one way or the other. It's a whole lot easier to be all truth. It's a whole lot easier to be all grace. But we learned about Jesus, according to John, that he was the full measure, the embodiment, that he was willing to navigate the tension, mess that was being truth and like I've loved. If you're going to live like I've lived, then you must be willing to navigate the tension and deal with the mess of being full of both grace and truth. And then last week we looked at several examples from Jesus' life. His calling of Matthew, the tax collector, to be a disciple, the woman at the well, the woman caught in the act of adultery, the thief on the cross. Powerful examples of Jesus being the full embodiment of both grace and truth. But today, that Jesus told, that is probably his most powerful teaching on this concept. So this morning we're going to turn to the book of Luke chapter 15. If you grew up in church, if you went to Sunday school, I'm sure you've heard this story countless times. If you're here today and you're not a Christian, if you're kind of new to church, then more than likely you've heard this story at some point, or at least heard a reference today. So today we're going to dive into it in kind of some detail. In Luke chapter 15, Luke begins, he says, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus." And this is important to note. We talked last week a little bit about tax collectors, how hated they were. I mean, we hate tax collectors today, but they were even more hated in Jesus' day. Tax collecting was like this Ponzi scheme, and basically Rome sold the right to collect taxes, and as long as Rome got their cut, they didn't care. So if you bought the right to collect taxes to something, you could charge whatever you wanted to charge. And if somebody didn't want to pay, you just called up the local Roman outpost and said, "I need a couple of Roman soldiers to come down and rough Joe Schmo up because he don't want to pay his taxes." And there was nothing you could do about it. I mean, it was a racket. It was like the mafia, and they were hated. The tax collectors were so bad that they had their own category. All throughout the New Testament, you read tax collectors and sinners. It was like people didn't want to offend the sinners by lumping the tax collectors into the same category. So you've got, in this instant, you've got the worst of the worst gathered around to hear Jesus. And then Luke tells us, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, like the religious establishment, the religious right, they're gathered around to hear Jesus too. And they had this problem because they muttered among themselves, "This man, Jesus, he welcomes sinners and tax collectors." It's like he's comfortable being around them. And even more weird to them was those kind of people of Jesus. If we put it in our context today, if Jesus was pastoring a church, the room would be packed out with both people that consider themselves right with God and those who did not consider themselves to be right with God, because they would want to hear what Jesus had to say, and it bothered the religious people. It's like, does he condone their behavior? I mean, they seem to be comfortable in his presence. He seems to be comfortable in their presence. Is he okay with how they live? Is he? And it bothers us. We've got the worst of the worst, the best of the best. We've got a perfect opportunity for grace and truth. Jesus begins to teach. He could have leaned to the side of truth, and in doing so validated the religious establishment, leaving that day feeling good about themselves, feeling vindicated that that's right, I'm right, my doctrine is right, my behavior is right, and in doing so causing the unrighteous to leave, feeling even farther away from God. Jesus could have leaned toward grace, made the unrighteous people feel better about themselves, causing the religious establishment to get their panties in a wad and all kinds of stuff. But Jesus does what only Jesus can do and perfectly navigates this tension of both grace and truth. Instead of talking about morality, instead of talking about righteousness and unrighteousness, Jesus tells three stories about lost things. So here we go this morning. Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? Of different backgrounds, theological positions, life experiences, everybody instantly finds. Yeah, that's exactly what we believe. The 99 that were safe and found, and we would go after the one that was lost. And you've got these unrighteous people and these very self-righteous people on not. And he says, and when you find it, would you not put it on your shoulders and bring it back home? And you would tell everybody, and you would be excited, and you would throw a celebration. And then with everybody nodding and agreeing, Jesus says, I tell you that in the same way, there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who do not need to repent. And before they can even begin to get offended, or before they can even begin to make the connection, Jesus launches into another parable. He says, suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Now, those silver coins were a drachma. And in that day, a drachma was worth about a day's wages. So she has lost a coin that represents about 1 day's wages. And even more than that, this particular coin was often a wedding gift that was given to women. These 10 coins were a very special gift given to women. So not only has she lost something that just by sheer market value carries incredible value, but she has lost a coin that is very sentimental in nature as well. And he says, if a woman loses one of these coins, doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? Basically, she'll rip the house apart trying to find a coin. And all the women in the audience are going, yeah, exactly. Exactly. She'd call me. I'd have to come home early from work. I'd have to move the furniture to help her find the coin. And there would be, hell to pay until the coin is found. Everybody's in complete agreement. And then Jesus says that when she finds it, she calls her friends, her neighbors, and they celebrate, rejoice with me. I have found my lost coin. And again, Jesus makes this point. In the same way, I tell you, there's rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents. And in 2 stories, Jesus establishes this principle about the value of lost things, about this passionate preoccupation with that which is lost. And he introduces something of value. Our mind, we don't sit, a lost one with the thing that has become lost. And then Jesus makes an even greater leap to another story, one that carries far more relational and emotional energy than the first two. The first thing, a sheep was lost. A story about a son who was lost. And no matter where you are today, you've probably heard this story before. Verse 13, Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. Now, to put it in context of that day, essentially the son comes to his father and says, look, Dad, I'm tired of living in your house. I'm tired of your rules. Basically, Dad, you have no value to me except what you're ultimately going to give me. That I would rather you be dead so I can get my inheritance and go live my life, do my thing, live by my rules. Essentially, he was saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. Because the only reason I'm still here, the only reason I'm still around, because I want what's coming to me. Now, everyone in the audience would have been just blown away by the audacity, by the disrespect, by the disloyalty of a son to say such a thing to the father. But Jesus takes it even farther and says the father acquiesces to the son's request. So he divided his property between the 2 sons. He tells the son, okay, I will give you what you want. And he liquidates assets and gives the younger son his portion of the inheritance. Verse 13, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth. He wasted everything. I mean, he lived it up. That everything was gone. And on top of that, a severe famine hit the land. So not only was he lacking in resources, but everybody around him was lacking in resources. And at this point, everyone in the audience is thinking, that's what you deserve. You are getting, and the only job he can find is with a pig farmer. Now, to understand the depth of this, to Jewish people, pigs were unclean animals. They could not touch them. They could not be around them. They could not associate with them. To do so would make them ceremonially unclean. They would be unable to worship. They would be unable to be around other Jews until they went through himself to deserve, you little punk kid. And things were so bad that Jesus says that he was so lacking in resources, he was so slop that he was feeding these pigs day in and day out thinking, I'll eat some of that. I mean, it's like things are so bad, I'll even go eat at Taco Bell. I'll even eat what the pigs are eating. And everybody in the audience is thinking, that's what you deserve. And Jesus could have ended the story there. And it would have been a great story. And people would have went home and they would have told the story to their children, being like, hey, listen to this story. This is what happens to you if you're disrespectful. This is what happens to you if you're not responsible. So if you're ever thinking about saying this to me, this is what's going to happen to you. And it would have been a great story. But Jesus continues on. It says the young man finally comes to his senses. He thinks to himself, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father. I'll say to him, and he begins to rehearse this speech. Father, I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. No longer worthy to be called your son. Him in the pig farm, and that would have been a good story, but this is going to get even better. He's got the audacity to go home. This story is about to get awesome. I just can't wait to hear what happens when the son makes it back to the house. And Jesus says, so he got up and went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with. And Jesus could have stopped right there and asked the audience to fill in the blank. And everyone would have responded with anger. Because that's the logical emotion. That's the rational response to someone who has done such a terrible thing. To someone that would have the audacity to show that level of disrespect to his father, of saying, I wish you were dead. The only value you have to me is what it is that you're going to give me. I'm tired of being your son. I'm tired of being in this house. And then he has the audacity to waste everything and crawl home. Anger. Anger is the logical emotion. Every father, every mother, every daughter, every son in the audience is thinking, yes, I would be angry. If that were my son, if that were my brother, and he did that to my father, I would be angry at him. And can I tell you today that that's how most lost people feel, that God feels about them, that he's angry. In light of what they've done, in light of the life that they've lived, in light of who they are and what they've become, they believe that God is angry with them. Why would he feel anything other than anger towards them in light of still a long way off? His father saw him and was filled with compassion. 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 At which point everyone in the audience is instantly confused. Because most of them had probably heard Jesus speak before. They'd heard these stories. And they had learned that when Jesus told these kind of stories, that usually one person in the story represented God, and usually one figure in the story represented them. And up to this point, they've been tracking along with the idea that the Father represented God, and this son was about to get what was coming to him. He was about to get the punishment that he deserved. And then instead of responding with anger, the Father responds in compassion. And everybody in the audience is going, whoa, wait. And in that moment, the self-righteous people, the religious elite, discover that their standards were apparently higher than even God's. And all the unrighteous people discover that maybe they've been looking at God the wrong way this whole time. And the father responds. He says that the son, it says he was filled with compassion. His speech, Father, I've sinned against heaven, I've sinned against God, I've sinned against you. Again, truth, no argument there. I've sinned against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Again, truth, no argument there at all. But it's like the father's not even listening. The father says to his servants, quick. And even the gracest among us today are like, whoa, time out. Quick? Like, maybe we should slow your roll, Jesus. Let's see if this is authentic. Let's give this some time to see if he's sincere. Maybe this is like a jailhouse confession. This is like the thief on the cross from last week. I'm rededicating my life. You're about to die. Oh, Jesus, I'm going to try harder. You're not going to make it off the cross. There's no chance to try harder. Maybe he just ran out of money. Maybe he thought, I'm going to go home, and if I can just make it past Dad alive, if I can just make it to Mama, Mrs. Grace, then maybe things are going to be okay. So people are like, whoa, slow down. How about some intervention? How about some counseling? How about some behind the woodshed, heart-to-heart moments before we get this carried away? And the Father says, no, quick, bring the best robe, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger, which was identification that he belongs to that family. Instantly restored. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. I mean, haven't we all had moments of like, yeah, go out back and kill the calf. Let's have a party. You know, I grew up in the country. We kind of had some of those. But in those days, you know, anybody with means, there would be a calf that they would, you know, the children would go out and feed it every day. They'd name it, you know, Betsy Sue or something. You know, they're going to fatten this calf up. And on an occasion, they would kill the fatted calf. So the children are like, hey, there's a party. What are we going to eat at the party? And the parents are like, Betsy Sue. And the kids are like, oh, no, that's no good. But they would have this calf that was reserved for celebration. And the Father says, look, go get the calf, kill it, get it ready. We're going to have a party. We're going to have a party. And listen to verse 24. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. And the people in the audience are like, whoa. What? No, he deserves punishment. I mean, do you remember what he did? He doesn't deserve a party. He didn't even deserve to be in the family. And we're going to throw him a party? We begin the story this way, that a father had 2 sons. The younger son had asked for his inheritance and left. The older son stayed. And the older son was doing what older sons do. They were working. He's being the good kid. How many oldest siblings do we have in the room today? And you're like the good kid. If you have younger children that cause incredible heartache and pain, even in church today, because they're still out there doing what, coming home from the fields. And he hears the sound of music. I mean, he's dirty, he's been sweating, he's been working all day, and he's like, what's going on? So we ask one of the servants, and the servant says, your father's killed the fatted calf because your brother has come home. He's like, whoa, Dad killed what? Dad killed my brother? That's okay. Like, no. Your brother's home safe, so Dad killed the calf. And the brother's like, he did what? He did what? So he gets angry, and he refuses to come in. So now the father's faced with a dilemma. He wants to throw a party. And he's got one son that doesn't want to come to the party because he don't feel worthy. He's not qualified for a party. And then he's got another son that doesn't want to come to the party because he don't believe his brother's qualified. He don't believe his brother's worthy of a party. So the father comes out. The older brother became angry. Again, Jesus knows that that's that emotion that everybody in the audience is feeling. So he just puts the words in their mouth. And now instantly everybody in the crowd identifies with the older brother. He should be angry at his brother for what he did. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father. He said, look, I've been here. I've been slaving away. I've been obeying. Anybody ever met any angry Christians? Don't point. Please don't point. Don't elbow somebody. Some of you grew up in a church with a bunch of angry Christians. Some of you left the church because of angry Christians. You know, I always found it amazing. Man, I grew up in those hellfire and brimstone churches, and it was always amazing watching a preacher yell and scream for 45 minutes about the love of God to the point it's like vessels are about to blow up in his head. But the whole time he's talking about love, you're like, dude, what are you so see anger? Some of you have scrolled through television before and you've come across a Christian television station and you're like, dude, why is that guy so angry? It's like, why is he screaming so much about love? I mean, you imagine a household like that. I love you. Well, you don't sound like it. You know, it's like, it sounds like a marital fight. You know, coming to blows like, oh, I love you. Well, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't sound like it. It's amazing that Christians can come in and sing songs about love. We hear love and joy and peace and all that stuff's kind of fruit of the Spirit, but I don't want to be fruity. I just want to be mad. I just want to be mad. And you're like, and some of you looked at, you saw that growing up and you're like, look, the Christian life is hard enough as it is. I mean, I got to try hard. I got to be good. I got to believe these things, got to do these things. If I'm going to do all that, and I'm going to wind up like that, I'm out. I mean, who wants to try really hard to be angry? I mean, I can go sin and have fun. I mean, that sounds a whole lot more appealing. Some of you are laughing nervously because you did that. And it's understandable. It's okay. I grew up in a church that made you want to go do that. It's like, man, if somebody could smile, this love thing could be a little bit more believable. Can I tell you why some of us are so angry? And this is going to make you angry, but that's okay. You're predisposed for that anyway. Some of us, we have this belief that God owes us something. We believe God owes us something, and we're afraid somebody else is going to get it. And we believe God owes us something because we've tried really hard. We've been really good. By God, we've been to church every Sunday. We're not like those other people. We don't miss. I grew up in an environment where we had like a tiered system of holiness because we had Sunday school, and then we had Sunday morning church, and then we had Sunday night church, and then we had Wednesday night church. And by God, about 3 or 4 times a year, we were going to have revival. And they could be anywhere from 3 to 4 days to 3 to 4 weeks. And if you really love Jesus, you're going to be there. And like the Catholics, we don't really believe in purgatory. There may be one for those Sunday morning only Christians. Those people that only come, there's going to be like a filtering ground of whether or not they really get in. And then the people that come Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, there's like a 7th layer of heaven for those people because they really love God. And we feel like God owes us something because we've been good and we've tried hard and we paid our tithes and we served and we raised our kids right. And by God, we didn't watch TV and we didn't do those sinful things that everybody else is doing. And we feel like God owes us something. You know what that's called? That's called self-righteousness. And that may make you a very good Christian, but it don't make you a very good disciple. You can go build a church with that kind of attitude. You can build a denomination. Or you can go join a political party with that kind of attitude. You can start a boycott, and you'll be a very good Christian. But you won't be a very look anything like Jesus. And the older brother's angry. And he don't want to go to the party because he don't think his younger brother deserves a party. He says, look, I've been slaving. I've never disobeyed your orders. Isn't it amazing how good we feel when we're around people that are really bad? I mean, if you're a parent, you're like, whatever, you have not disobeyed. You're a punk little kid just like every other little boy. Don't tell me you haven't disobeyed orders. But when you're comparing yourself to a younger brother that just wasted daddy's inheritance on drugs, alcohol, and prostitutes, I don't act like him. I don't talk like her. I'm not where they are on the weekends. By God, I'm in church. We don't do those kind of things. We don't talk that kind of way. We're good. We're good. We've not disobeyed. And listen, the father's like, but when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes, like, come on, Dad, I'm a guy, you're a guy. We know what he's been doing. Like, I'm the good-looking one. I got the deep end of the gene pool. He's ugly. You know that there was no action going on if there was not money involved. Let's not tell Mom. We don't want to break Mom's heart. But you know what he's been doing. Dad, there was drugs, there was alcohol, and there was women, and there was money exchange. Do you know what he's been doing with your money? And now he comes home, and you want to throw him a party? And this is incredible. I love verse 31. The father says, my son, you're always with me. To which the older son is probably thinking, what? We've been having the same conversation. What are you talking about that I'm always with you? What does that have to do with anything? And the father's like, it has everything to do with everything. He said, you've always been with me. The Greek word is the word mita. It basically, the literal translation would be, you've never been lost to me. You've never been lost to me. Son, this party's not about performance. It's about proximity. We're not throwing your brother a party because of his performance. We're throwing your brother a party because he's back. It matters. You've been good. But what matters to me more than the fact that you've been good is the fact that you've never been lost. That you've always been close to me. This is not about performance. This is about proximity. Your brother was lost, but now he is found. He was dead, but now he is alive. We must celebrate. He says in verse 32. I find it so amazing. how we sometimes as Christians can get so mad at people who do not believe like we believe for not behaving like we think they ought to behave. Why do we find it so surprising that people that are not in relationship with God don't orient their lives around God? Not made the decision to surrender their life to God, choose to orient their lives around themselves, around their own pleasure, around their own comfort, around their own conveniences. Why does that make us so angry? Like the older brother. And the father says, look, this is not about performance. This is about proximity. He was lost to me, but now he is found. And because of that, we are going to celebrate. We have to celebrate because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found. Listen today, probably the biggest belief, the biggest distinguishing belief between a Christian and a disciple is this belief that there is nothing we could do to make God love us more. And there is nothing we could ever do to make God love us less. I know we've said this multiple times in this journey, but this is foundational. If we're going to love like Jesus, if we're going to be the church that Jesus wants us to be, it's this understanding that there is nothing we could do that could ever make God love us. Person we come eyeball to eyeball with. Every person we rub shoulders with, the same is true of them. It doesn't matter how far they have ran. It doesn't matter how far that they've dropped into the pit of sin and unrighteousness, that the love of God for them has not changed, that God is not preoccupied with their behavior, but God's heart is broken because they are lost. Listen today, disciples do not get. Disciples want to see lost things. Monday night, we were at the ball field, and last week was one of those weeks, just hectic, crazy busy. Ashton had a ball tournament, played 6 games Saturday. Serena and the girls were there all day. I worked all day. Sunday was an incredibly busy day. Both services, starting point, board meeting, just an exhausting weekend. Monday, another Monday, in the night at the ballpark. During the second game, we're just throttling this little team that this is their first year to play. And by this point, you're just feeling sorry for them, and you're like, quit scoring, let the night be over. So we're waiting for the game to end. Most of the other games have ended. People frightening experience you could ever have is that overwhelming feeling of, where is my child? And I just began looking around. She had been playing over behind the dugout with our coach's little boy. I see him. All of a sudden, the emotional level goes way up because she's not where she's supposed to be. And I bolt out of my chair, and I'm frantically looking around. And listen, I love shows like Law & Order SVU and Criminal Minds and all those twisted, sicko shows. And my mind goes there in a hurry because of the stuff that I have watched. And I'm watching all these people walking out of the ball field thinking, is there a chance that my child is with somebody? And what probably lasted 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. And I'm up and I'm wandering around the area that we're in. And finally, I look over and up against the building, I see her sitting on a ledge, hiding behind a trash dumpster. And she is grinning from ear to ear. I do not know why. And in the moment, all the panic subsides. And the only thing that mattered in my world was my daughter is found. Listen, if you've ever been a parent in a situation like that, you don't think, well, I've still got my other 2 kids. It's all good. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Or 1 out of 2. In a moment like that, the only thing that matters is the lost becoming found. That which is gone being reclaimed. This morning, our Heavenly Father feels the same way about lost things. He is not angry with people that are lost. His heart is broken because he wants them to become found. And if we're going to love like Jesus, then we must model the same attitude and behavior. Can we quit getting mad at people that do not believe like we believe for not behaving like we think they ought to behave? Their matters is that they are lost, that they are separated. And can we make it our righteous obsession in helping that which is lost become found? We have a core value here at Genesis, and we do not live up to it all the time. But we have a core value that says found people, find people. Those that have experienced the grace of God should become passionate about seeing other people drink from the fountain of grace. That those who were once lost but are now found should be passionate about helping lost people become found. Those that were once dead toward God but are now alive should have a righteous passion about helping people that are dead toward God become alive again. And if we're going to be disciples, if we're going to be people that love like Jesus loved, then we need to develop a righteous obsession, not in anger, not a righteous indignation toward lost people, but a righteous obsession in helping lost people become found. We were once broken. We were once dead, cut off, separated, hopelessly on our behalf. There was nothing we could do to find our way back. There was nothing we could do to restore right relationship.